Hey, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present, and we're back again today, and we're talking about the assessment part of our review from standard number 2, the Gilded Age. So what we're going to do is to go back from that previous lesson that we gave you, and we were highlighting some of the highlights, of course, from the Gilded Age. Today we're going to put that into practice and go through and look at answering some of those questions from the Mississippi assessment program, U.S. history from 1877 to present. Remember, we told you now, if you don't prepare, this test can be a bear. So now, with that said, what we're going to do is look at standard number 2, industrialization, analyze industrialization and its impact on the United States in the late 19th and early 20th century. As a matter of fact, we're going to be talking about this objective quite a bit, because not only will we talk about it today, of course, with this particular lesson, but when we talk about industrialization specifically, we'll be looking at the same standard. So with that, what we'll do, of course, is go through and start looking at some of these test items. Remember what we told you after we gave you every one of those brief reviews in terms of the important historical touch points in U.S. history. We also try to give you a fact list that bolstered or supported those high points that we gave you. And we told you that one of the things that we would recommend is that you create flashcards to help you, gain some, gain some knowledge of all that content. And it's a lot of content. But the one saving grace that you have is that those flashcards allow you to learn a whole lot of content in a very short time. The Gilded Age assessment from Standard 2. Question number 2, this list includes characteristics of life and work found in many large U.S. cities during the 1900s. Child labor rate, tenement living, high infant mortality rate, dangerous working conditions. It says which factor led to an increase in the characteristics shown in the list? An increase in trade among North American countries, an increase in the number of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe, an increase in job opportunities along the west coast of the United States, an increase in the standard of living among immigrants in Northwestern Europe. Well, when you look at it, all these things happened because we had more people, of course, that were coming to American cities to look for jobs. Once again, something that we pointed out in the highlight and the review when we hit the high points of the Gilded Age in the previous lesson. Well, the best answer in my mind, and in their mind too, is going to be B, an increase in the number of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. All right, we look at question number 22 from the Gilded Age assessment. This list includes some provisions of an act passed by the U.S. Congress in 1882. It prohibited Chinese immigrants from becoming U.S. citizens. It halted the immigration of Chinese laborers to the United States for 10 years. It required certification of the Chinese government for non-laborers to enter the country. This particular act, what it seemed like it's doing to me, and I think you could probably reach the same conclusion, that it's designed to keep Chinese Americans from coming into the country. Matter of fact, the name of the act was something called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is also listed in the fact list in, when we looked at the high points, of course, for the Gilded Age. Which factor was most responsible for the passage of this legislation? A, concerns about increased political unrest and revolution spreading in the United States. B, concerns about decreased access to housing on the east coast of the native-born Americans. C, concerns about decreased access to employment and lower wages for native-born Americans. D, concerns about increased demand for public assistance programs funded in the United States. Let me give you a universal. When it comes to immigration, one of the biggest reasons why people don't want immigration is they don't want American jobs to be taken and given to immigrants. And the one that deals with that is going to be C, concerns about decreased access to employment and lower wages for native-born Americans. So one of the other concerns is that if you hire an immigrant, the immigrant will work for less money than a native citizen. So if you're a native citizen, you don't want them to come in because they're taking your jobs. And number 2, they are taking the jobs and they're not demanding a fair wage for those jobs. All right, Gilded Age Assessment 2, once again, in 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 forbade combinations in the restraint of trade, but lacked enforcement power. As practices of large corporations continue to result in monopolistic forms and to reduce competition, Congress responded with the passage of the Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914. Congress also created an enforcement arm, the Federal Trade Commission. Today, the FTC monitors practices that might lead to trust or discourage fair competition. The FTC powers extend beyond regulating corporations to protecting consumers. Based on an analysis of the information, what inference can be made about the impact of antitrust legislation? Well, what these trust or monopolies do is that they push competitors out of the market, which means that they're the only ones selling a product. Well, you and I both know if we're the only ones selling a product and the only place that the consumer can get it is from us, what do we charge? The answer to that is whatever we want to charge. So the thing is here, if there's no competition in the marketplace, then business owners can set prices to be whatever they want them to be. And if you're a consumer, you're at their mercy and you have to pay that particular price. Based on the analysis of the information, what inference can be made about the impact of antitrust legislation? A, companies lost influence over rules for illegal incorporation. B, competition among businesses reduced consumer confidence. C, laissez-faire capitalism was weakened by government regulations. D, monopolies lost tax incentives that kept costs down from consumers. And the best answer is all those businesses that were not being regulated by the government for the first time are regulated by the government. And they can't create these monopolies that can harm consumers in the marketplace. All right, 3, the following excerpt comes from the 1896 Democratic Party platform. We denounce arbitrary interference by federal authorities in the local affairs as a violation of the Constitution of the United States. And we especially object to the government by injunction as a new and highly dangerous form of oppression by which federal judges, in contempt of the laws and the rights of citizens, become at once legislators, judges, and executioners, which event is an example of the government by injunction to which the Democratic Party objected. A, interference in the Pullman strike. B, subsidies for transcontinental railroads. C, spoil system for rewarding lawyers for political jobs. D, restricted immigration from Cuba and the USS Maine. The best answer, where the government steps in to try and act on the behalf of a business, in this particular case, is going to be A, interference in the Pullman strike. All right, the Gilded Age assessment. Standard 2, this political cartoon shows John D. Rockefeller wearing a large crown and standing on an oil storage tank labeled Standard Oil. The crown is adorned with railroad cars, oil tanks, and the names of 4 railroad companies and topped with a dollar sign. This cartoon indicates that John D. Rockefeller became the king of combinations by Standard 2.4, limiting his oil sales to railroad companies, by using his railroad profits to purchase oil companies, by driving up oil prices to put railroads out of business, D, forming an alliance to control railroad freight rates and oil prices. All right, so this cartoon indicates what? All right, so you have the St. Paul Railroad, the Jersey Central Railroad, the Reading Railroad, the Lehigh Valley Railroad. All these railroads are owned by Standard Oil and John D. Rockefeller. Now, how did he get them? In most cases, he uses profits to purchase other oil companies and made sure that he was the only oil company in the marketplace. So he could set prices to be whatever he wanted. All right, we have another question. This chart lists some events that occurred during the Gilded Age, those turbulent years beginning after the Civil War and ending at the start of the 20th century. Year 1880, the Republican Party splits into factions over the spoils system. 1880, Republican James Garfield, a reform candidate, is elected president. 1881, President Garfield is assassinated by Charles Couteau. 1883, Congress passed the Pendleton Civil Service Act. Every one of those things you saw right there, once again, was in the fact list. And if you can master the fact list by using the flashcards once again and getting help from parents or whoever can help you create them, I would suggest creating them yourself. But it's in the fact list. The events in the chart mainly relate to which problem of the Gilded Age? A, political patronage. B, unregulated immigration. C, bribery, graft, and scandals. D, rapid urbanization and industrialization. Well, the spoil system was based on a system called patronage, where you got a job based on who you know, not based on what you know. And the answer, political patronage. All right, 4, this excerpt comes from a legislative act signed into law by President Chester Arthur on January 16, 1883. First, for open competitive examination for testing the fitness of applicants for public services now classified or classified hereunder. Such examination shall be practical in their character and so far as shall relate to those matters which will fairly test the relative capacity and fitness of the persons examined to discharge the duties duties of the service which they seek to be appointed. In other words, if you're going to get a government job, you got to pass the government civil service exam. And that's created, once again, directly from the fact list. Go to the fact list, learn the content. And if you learn the content, you'll know what the answer was. Which two issues for which the public demanded reform were addressed by this act? Voter suppression, voter registration fraud, the use of bribes to influence government policy, D, government employment based on political party affiliation, E, firing or demoting government employees for political reasons. And the best answer is E and D. Those are the two best answers. So government employment based on political party affiliation, you couldn't get a job, anymore based on just because your political party, and then affiliation, and you couldn't be fired or demoted from a government job without cause. Last question, I think. It says the Gilded Age Assessment, Standard 2, once again, the U.S. Patent Office granted a patent in response to the patent application shown below to Thomas Edison on January 27, 1880. The patent was not for the product's invention, but for an improvement to an earlier design. That's another thing. A lot of people think that Edison, of course, was responsible for creating the light bulb. No. What he did is he created an improved light bulb filament. All right, the improved design made the product reliable, safe, and practical. How did Edison's improvement to this product most likely affect the lives of factory workers? A, it increased the hourly wages for factory workers. B, extended the working hour of factory workers. C, it allowed factory workers to have a more leisure time. D, it allowed factory workers to mass produce items on an assembly line. Well, I keep harping on it, but if you go to the content and you go to the facts that accompanies each one of the reviews, one of the things it talks about is that the light bulb and Edison created shift work. Shift work meaning that now you could work, and it doesn't have to be daylight hours. You can work now on first shift, of course, from 8 o'clock or from 9 to 5, and then from 5 to 1 or 5 to 12, and then from 12 to 8 now. So what we're now doing is we're extending the work hours of factories. So the light bulb gave us shift work. What we try to do, of course, is to give you some ideas of some of the questions, of course, that will be on the MAP assessment. Please make sure that you take the advice that we've given you and master the content that accompanies each one of the lesson reviews. So my advice, look at each one of those lesson reviews that give you the highlights of what's important, and then go through and look at the content or the fact list that accompany. And that way, you can put yourself in a position that you can do quite well in the U.S. history MAP assessment. Because remember, we told you now, if you don't prepare, it will be a bear. And you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're not able to pass the last exit exam that allows you to leave high school. This is Coach Anderson with Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. And with that, I'll see you next time.